Good morning, friends and neighbors, and welcome to the poem of the day. Today's poem is celebrating its centenary this year, so it's from 1925, and it's by the poet Countee Cullen, who's an American poet associated with the Harlem Renaissance movement in the early part of the 20th century. The poem I'm going to read comes from a collection that he published in 1925 called Color. And Cullen was known, or I guess is known more in retrospect as the movement has been studied more, the Harlem Renaissance movement, for having a bit more of a conservative formal style and lyrical style than some of his contemporaries who were exploring new forms in order to create a unique voice, thinking of someone like Langston Hughes. Now, that's not to say that Cullen is in any ways worse or less important or less unique, but he was reliant upon using older and more traditional forms to explore new subjects and subjects that these forms had not previously been used to explore, namely race in America. And I think that using old forms to explore subjects like that is kind of a radical experiment and a radical statement in its own right that um, is worth giving time to and should not be overlooked. I've noticed as I've taken and I've taught some American literature courses that Cullen comes up often on the periphery and not often as one of the key and core figures that of a canon that absolutely must be taught. Now, part of that, of course, is due to there's only so much time in a semester, but someone like Hughes or Gwendolyn Brooks almost never gets cut, and there's absolutely good reason for that. But I think that there's a bit of an argument that's being made by leaving Cullen always sort of mentioned but not heard within the class. So today I want us to hear one of his poems, and it's called Yet Do I Marvel. Yet do I marvel. I doubt not God is good, well-meaning, kind, and did he stoop to quibble, could tell why the little buried mole continues blind, why flesh that mirrors him must someday die. Make plain the reason tortured Tantalus is baited by the fickle fruit. Declare if merely brute caprice dooms Sisyphus to struggle up a never-ending stair. Inscrutable his ways are, and immune to catechism by a mind too strewn with petty cares to care slightly. Excuse me, let me try that again. Inscrutable his ways are, and immune to catechism by a mind too strewn with petty cares to slightly understand what awful brain compels his awful hand. Yet I do marvel at this curious thing, to make a poet black and bid him sing. Apologies for struggling at the beginning of the second part of the poem there, around lines 8 through 10. Part of my struggle is, as you can see, I'm only about halfway through my first cup of coffee, but I think part of the struggle as well is that portion of the poem contains, it goes 4 lines and contains no punctuation in it. And we're typically taught to sort of pause at the end of lines, but that's not really the way that poetry's written. Poetry's written to observe the punctuations. And I was trying to do that, and as my attention's drawn to that portion now by my struggling with it, I can also hear in it a mind that is attempting to struggle to recognize the main tension of the poem, which is namely that the speaker of the poem is a believer in God, a devotee to God, perhaps even a disciple, someone who prays a lot. We can get this especially from the first line, I doubt not God is good, well-meaning, kind, right? That's a credo, a statement of a believer right off the top. So this isn't a poem of, because there's evil in the world, there can be no God. This is a poem where the speaker acknowledges and knows, almost on equal footing, the truth of the existence of a good God and the truth of some absurd and meaningless struggles that have tormented people throughout the ages. The examples that he gives are from mythology. Tantalus, who is a mythological creature tortured by seeing all of this fruit. He was hungry, and there was all of this food and fruit, but he can never reach it. As soon as he's able to get there, it disappears. And Sisyphus, of course, was a mythological figure who was punished by being forced to roll a boulder up a hill, but he can never get it to the top. As soon as he gets it near the top, it rolls back down, and he's to do this for all eternity. So what we can hear within those two allusions to mythology is somebody with a deep desire to nourish themselves, whether it's through food or whether it's through the feeling of accomplished a task and meaningful labor, but they're always deprived of that right at the end by some unseen force that kind of transcends them. And Cullen uses those two examples and compares them at the very end with the final two lines. Yet do I marvel at this curious thing, to make a poet black and bid him sing. And the connection that he's making there has to do with torment and punishment and desire, tantalizing desire. That within the time that he's living in the United States as a gifted poet, he's also facing racial prejudice on the level of the law, on the level of the community, likely on the level of who is going to value and read and appreciate his poetry. But it's not just a complaint about, no one's going to publish my work, I'm not going to be famous. It's a cry out that I'm not going to be heard and acknowledged as a valued voice and as an individual with an interiority and with something to say. I said at the beginning of this video that he's saying all of these complex things and expressions within a rather conventional form. And a quick note on the conventional form here. You might have noticed as I read that this is a sonnet. It's a Petrarchan sonnet. We've encountered one of those already. So that means that it has 14 lines, and those lines are broken up into two major parts. The first 8 are the octet, and the last 6 are the sextet. And the first 8 have a different rhyme scheme. A, B, C, D, C, D. And then the final 4 go E, F, G. I'm sorry. In this case, that's wrong. It goes E, F, G, G. And the first 8 will often set up the problem or the question in the last 6, complicate that or attempt some sort of answer to it. So what I was telling you earlier about him referring to the mole, the death of the flesh, Tantalus, and Sisyphus, all of that's contained in the first 8, which is the problem or the question being laid out. And then the long kind of 4-line declaration of God's immunity to catechism, meaning that you can sort of know all of the theology or all of the rules of a religion and not really understand anything yet about the central question of the poem that the poet's marveling at, why he should be made black and bid to sing, right? You have this desire for creative expression. So what Cullen's doing, I think, is resurrecting this old form, this Petrarchan form, and placing in it not just allusions to ancient texts, but also a very thoughtful and impassioned plea and reflection on his current condition, which he sees as one that is kind of continuing the torment of people whose punishments are unjust or people whose punishments overreach the things that in the cases of the mythological figures they ever did. So to the point that it becomes seemingly meaningless and alienating and depersonalizing. And yet he's able to end this with a declaration of his own singing, an exclamation of his own singing. If there are other things that you've seen in this poem, I'd be really curious to hear about them. I'm hoping to read more Cullen on my own as I continue through. But I was very happy to be able to give this poem attention because it's one that I've always seen kind of anthologized, but have never spent a whole lot of time with. So I hope that it was meaningful and beneficial for you to spend that time as well this morning. I wish you all a blessed day, and may peace be with you.